Hello, emerging cricket fans, and welcome to our end of year show for 2020. We've got loads to talk about, and we'll be answering all your questions. But first, a shout out to those who support us on Patreon. From as little as $2 US a month as a patron, you can access bonus content at Emerging Cricket and have a say on our show's direction. A shout out to our newest patron, Xavier Kovalic. Thank you so much for joining the EC movement. To sign up, log on to Patreon. That's patreon.com/emerging cricket. But for now, enjoy our end of year review. Hello and welcome to our end of year special here at the Emerging Cricket Podcast, online and on Sport FM in Perth. I'm Daniel Beswick. Tim Cutler and Nick Skinner are with me. Boys, it's been a very interesting end of our year. I think 2 weeks ago we spoke about how we were all going home for Christmas and we were very lucky to do it. Only one of us, I think, was able to do that. None of us were able to travel. Tim, you're marooned in Brisbane. How's life up there?
Good pun there. Yes, I am. I was planning to get down to Sydney and get up. Like, it was a bit of a hop, skip and jump to see family, friends and whatnot. And then that didn't happen. So I've spent a lot more time editing emerging cricket stuff. So for everyone that's been reading all that stuff pumping out, you can thank the Avalon cluster in Sydney for keeping me out of New South Wales. Like some great friends up here opened their houses and liquor cabinets to me over Christmas.
That's dangerous.
It's been, I know, danger. But very relaxing, Daniel. How about your good self? I can see a very well-kept kitchen behind you. That tells me that you're not in your own house.
Correct. Yeah, likewise, I was affected by the Avalon cluster as well. I'm stuck in Melbourne. I was meant to be home for Christmas and then was actually going to go back up to Sydney for New Year's. Unfortunately, neither of those happened because the Victorian borders would have been closed for me to come back. So I've been in Melbourne from the 15th of December. We'll be here till the 21st, I think. Wasn't able to see my family on Christmas, which was a little bit disappointing, but I made the most of the lemons that COVID life gave me. I managed to find myself at a Christmas lunch. An old friend from high school who lives down here with her family in Melbourne. I was able to have lunch with them, and it was a big, fat Greek spread of Christmas lunch. It was incredible, to say the least. Was very much welcomed with open arms, and actually saw them again on New Year's Day as well for another lunch. So I really can't complain, and things are good here. Yeah. In an apartment in South Bank in Melbourne, and the housekeeping helps keep this place relatively tidy. But I also don't have that much. I don't have luggage really down here, or not a lot of it anyway, because I thought I was only going to be here for 5 days. Turns out I'm going to be here for 35 days.
Wow!
But yeah, making the most of everything that's happening.
So when you turned up that second time, I can imagine how great Greek food. It was like, that isn't a man, that's an eating machine.
Did you just
go straight?
Every meat you could think of. We had this Polish sausage, lobster. Oh, goodness gracious. It was incredible.
Thanks for the invite. I could have flown to Melbourne. I just wasn't able to go to Sydney, but oh dear. Well, at least you made the most of it. And isn't it amazing the kindness of the people around us at times like this?
Oh,
and we've only just seen a little snifter of it, really, haven't we? Considering what else is going on in the world. And this is the first time we've been in lockdown for a while, but
yeah, between them and my employers, I have a lot of people to thank for everything. Nicholas Skinner up in New South Wales and looking to be largely unaffected, although I imagine you wanted to go up to Queensland to visit some family over Christmas as well. How did you spend your time over Christmas?
Yeah, similar story. I was meant to be flying up around the same time Tim was flying down, but again we have the good people of Avalon to thank for that being cancelled. My view on the northern beaches is basically we should just blow up the Spit Bridge and just leave them there and just lock the whole place down. But yeah, we spent Christmas with Brooklyn's family, so that was nice enough. Pretty low key because of course we had some restrictions around how many people were allowed in the house and all that sort of thing. But it was still good. But yeah, a bit of a shame I couldn't see all the rallies up in Brisbane.
I did have one good emerging cricket story. Nishad Rago, our good friend, had got out of New South Wales earlier with his partner Alice and was driving from Noosa back down to Sydney, and he stopped off.
Oh, how good.
Stopped off in Brisbane. I don't know if I should be proud of this achievement, but they were just going to stop off, have a quiet lunch with me, and then they were going to continue driving down. They had an Airbnb booked at Burleigh, on the Gold Coast on the way down. Well, you go out for an afternoon with Tim Cutler.
This is true.
All I will say is that you should not have an Airbnb booked for that evening, and only one of them drives as well. Nish is the only one with his license. So all I can say is that I've got the one bed in here, but I made up the bed and it was fine. And a quite shaky duo left at midday the next day to either get into that Airbnb for the second night or continue down the 550 kilometres to Foster, where they're supposed to be going after. So there was some EC love had over that time. So that was great to see a familiar face.
Just on Nishad, at the start of the year when he was helping out Thailand and doing his roles there, we were down at Marnica with him, Nick, and we were going to have a quiet beer, and not many other places were open. We managed to find somewhere, and I think in the end, Nick, you slept in the hotel room of Nishad because we just stayed so late, and
in the same bed, in fact.
No, exactly. The number of hotel kind of sofas or like ends of beds or second beds of cricketers and cricket friends that you just end up with. It's like, oh yeah, look, I'll stay and get out. But yes, so there was some good times were had over that. But, again, parallel universes. There we are at Howard Smith Wharves under the Story Bridge in Brisbane, looking out onto the Brisbane River. And it was like, we got stickers on the ground for social distancing, but not a mask inside. Everyone's just going, oh, there's been no community transmission for weeks. And there it is. I can't get on a plane, go for an hour because of a cluster in New South Wales. Anyway, we've talked about that stuff enough. We know what it's like around the world, and it's terrible. It's just the juxtaposition is stark.
Yeah, to think that we could find ourselves in another little spot of bother here. And I'm normally very proud to say that I'm born in Manly, but given the events of the Northern Beaches over the last couple of weeks, I'm very much a Central Coast boy through and through. So
Manly supporters. What can we
yes,
say?
moving on. Happy New Year, gents, and Happy New Year to everyone in the EC community. We'll I suppose, reminisce and talk about some of the good things that did happen in 2020. And there were good things in the emerging cricket game. We will talk about them at some point. But I think the first sort of port of call is the associate winners in the ICC Awards of the decade. There was quite a Scottish presence. Catherine Bryce winning the Women's Associate Cricketer of the Decade. Kyle Kutzer winning the Associate Cricketer of the Decade. An amazing effort from Scotland. And thinking of Afghanistan too and their rise, Rashid Khan winning the T20I Player of the Decade as well. Quite a significant achievement considering he debuted in the format in 2015. Tim, first of all, congratulations on everything with you in terms of the show and being part of that panel, selecting the awards, at least talking about them in great detail. I must admit that with my responsibilities, I haven't been able to sit down and watch that production yet, but by all reports and speaking to a couple of people who were also involved in it, well, they had a lot of praise for your work, Tim, on everything there. So congratulations. And yeah, to look at Scotland's presence and Rashid Khan's victory there, I don't think we could be too surprised, but I think it's a great image to the associate game just to show and appreciate these players for all that they've done in the last decade of cricket.
Absolutely. Honoured to be invited to be part of the small nominations committee beforehand, then also to be on the voting panel. And then when they asked me to be on the show, I was like, okay. But no, always great chance to talk about cricketers of the emerging world and even a bit more about Rashid as well. I pressed onto my good friend Shafiq, former CEO of the ACB, for a little bit of background info there that hadn't been written about. So that was nice to share a little bit of insight there that people wouldn't have known otherwise. And Scotland swept it. I think Kyle's numbers, I just couldn't see anyone go past him. And whilst there was a public vote, the majority of the vote did come from that nominations committee. And with him being leading run scorer in ODIs, I think a number 2 in T20Is, I should know that. And I think he took an ODI wicket as well, so that's the most important thing. But I think I tried to say it in the coverage as well. I think that it was great to see so many good leaders of the emerging game in the nominees across there. I tried to impress onto the committee as well to say that, it's more than just the numbers in emerging cricket for what these players go through, and especially as captains leading their countries, when they're playing for funding, playing for the future of the game. It was good to see the likes of Paris, Peter Boren, and Sanaran, and Catherine Bryce, etc., in the women's that are leading these countries, and generally with the numbers as well. So that was good. Yeah, tough one on the women's side as well. I think, with Catherine not playing a lot of, let's say, recognised cricket early in the decade and being able to get those numbers together. But it was great to see someone that's been playing, for a country since she was 13 in 2011 and come through to be such a quality player. And as she showed in the Rachel Ho Flint Trophy as well, up there with the best full member cricketers out there as well. So, and the only thing looking back, I just hope that, I think Isaac actually said it in his piece covering it, that, we had teams of the decade for T20I, ODIs across men's and women's, and then tests on the men's side. Then that might have been great if we had an AM team of the decade as well, whether mixed formats or even that. So hopefully that's something that the ICC can look at in the future. But I guess there's nothing stopping us doing the same thing, is there?
Yeah, a lot of these guys would be on those teams. Yeah, I like your point about leadership there, Tim, because I'm a disappointed Boren voter.
Frustrated Boren voter.
Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of Peter Boren because of that leadership quality that he brought to the Dutch side. For a number of years, mostly throughout that whole decade, he was the beating heart of Dutch cricket, and so much of it rested on his shoulders. Obviously, Kotzer a very deserving winner. His numbers are incredible throughout that time period, and he's been playing for, I think over 15 years now. So he's been a core member of that Scottish team for such a long time. But yeah, Boren is perhaps a little bit underrated as an associate cricketer, because he was very much an overachiever, you could say. He described himself as being not very talented, but he works hard. I think that's a bit of a disservice. He was certainly talented, but he definitely made the most of that talent through working hard and for Dutch cricket and putting Dutch cricket first. So I think he would have been a good choice too.
I think, the numbers, and sorry, Bez, you're probably going to come with your reply there, but you look at the numbers of a McLeod and a Barrington, and even Safi and Sharif, who didn't make the final cut, and then behind them, Basant Regmi and Bernard Scholz of Namibia. Some amazing numbers throughout that period as well. We could have really had a short list of 15 deserved winners for all different reasons as well. Bilal Khan is another one who just has taken a bucket load of wickets, and his numbers are amazing. So it just goes to show how many high performers there have been, and how important they are to cricket in their nations. I think is the key throughout all this. So maybe if we do teams of the decade there, that might do better or do well to really recognise some of those names. But I agree. Pete Boren and I think Paris, you can put in the same in the same boat there of the lead. Oh, and Assad Vali, we haven't even mentioned him. Talks about sort of pillars of strength. In a country where the sport is sort of becoming a pillar of the community as well, not just a potential job opportunity for kids coming through, but is becoming, it's trying to teach good qualities within a community that is itself kind of growing up. So I don't know, it was a great process to go through and to really sit back and consider what these players bring to our game.
Yeah, well, Virat Kohli knows all about Peter Boren's bowling for what it's worth. But to look at, again, the 6 nominations, and yeah, as both of you have quite rightly said, you can make a case for all 6 of them winning it. I mean, Paris, just with the sheer weight on his shoulders of Nepali cricket, he's the backbone of Nepali cricket, and it has been, especially in the batting. If it wasn't for him, I don't think they'd be anywhere close to where Nepal are now. For Nepal players to run, they needed someone like Paris Khadka to walk first. We don't know if we'd ever see a Sandeep Mamachani without someone like Basant Regmi as well. We've heard that story too. But personally, I probably would have lobbed Kyle Kutzer as my nomination, because I just think he ticks all the boxes, and it's not even from a statistical standpoint. He has a huge World Cup 100 against Bangladesh in 2015. He has bowled a little bit. We've seen him, in the county game as well, but he's been at the coalface for a lot of associate cricket's problems over the last 10 years as well, and he's been quite forthright, opinionated. And I think, if someone was to lead a kind of players union or a players brigade in all of that, I think Kyle Kutzer would be one of the first people, thrown into the list to kind of head that up. We talked to Paul van Meekeren, who's looking at doing, the Dutch Cricketers Association as well. Kyle Coetzer would be the perfect fit. He was there for the pay dispute in Canada when that all happened at the Global T20. He played in the Everest Premier League. He did well there, and by all reports, his conduct there was incredible. A World Cup 100. I think he just ticks all the boxes. I mean, he won't say it, but he actually rolls them out okay as well when he bowls. He doesn't really bowl anymore, but technically so sound, an EC ambassador as well. I don't think we can really have any complaints, but with that with that award going his way. And then to look on the women's side of things too, we know all about Thailand's meteoric rise, and I can't remember which one of you made the point, but Sonoran Tipok could have easily won that award purely for her being at the start and the end of that incredible journey that Thailand are on and are still on. But looking at someone like, say, Sarah Bryce, she could win the next decade award, I think, because she's going to be playing international cricket at the highest level for at least the next 10 years, if only England don't poach her, but don't say it too loud because we don't want to give them too many ideas. But again, and Tim, I wanted to ask you this, talking to the people who were involved in it, just how much did some of the other judges in all of this have to say about these players as well? Because I know a lot of them would have been focused on the full member game. How much, of the knowledge did you impart on that group, just between mates here?
I've got a story about Kyle first. He's actually bowling a lot more in local cricket. He's really happy. He's got... I sound like he's handed the leadership chalice over to one of the young guys who I don't think Kyle was bowling himself at all, but all of a sudden he's now just little dibbly dobblies. You can imagine these green tops just
Oh yeah, so, he'd be deadly on him.
The ICC supplied stats packs on all the players, so everybody came in quite well versed and had stories themselves from when they'd seen these players generally in global events. And so it was good to be able to tell some stories about the importance of some of these guys that they may not know about. Paris is a great example there. Sonoran is one that they would know of, but not necessarily her background and why, although she's got great numbers and has been a great performer in many tournaments for Thailand, but, to be one of the first softball converts and to have led a country from go to, well, not even to woe, like it's still going. The only woe is us yelling from media rooms at World Cups, getting strange looks from people.
Oh, we'll get to that.
We'll talk all about that soon.
We'll get to that. But yeah, look, it was to be expected. There was a lot of debate on all the other awards as well. So I think there was a lot of leaning towards what emerging cricket brought to the table, really. So that was good to be able to share some of those stories. So it just shows how important T20I status, universal status is. So that was an interesting process, and I think it was just great for us to be invited to the table, really. I think that's a testament to the emerging cricket brand and how hard everybody works, and everyone who's listening to the podcast and everyone who contributes through Patreon. I think it was a win for the good guys there. It's nice that, I'd like to say that we're doing the right things for the right reasons, and I think that's being recognised. So good to be part of it.
Now, moving on, boys, and not many stories in the emerging game start with the BCCI, but we do have a couple of movements here at the organisation which might help push the idea of Olympic cricket forward. The best way to put it is that they haven't said no to Olympic cricket, but they're definitely asking a lot of questions. And Nick, you've kept your ear to the floor with a lot of this. It looks like they want clarification from India's Olympic governing body as to how the power will be shared between themselves and the Indian Olympic governing body in terms of what cricket will be in the future if cricket was to be in the Olympics. Now, before we came and chatted here off air, you were talking about, look at Team GB and the Olympics. We don't really see that struggle in, say, football, for instance, where in London they had a GB team for the London Games. They haven't sent out a team after that, but surely this is a conversation that should have been had a long time ago. I feel like this is a very elementary beginning to what should be a long, fruitful relationship between cricket and say, Olympics. If we need the BCCI to have these conversations now in 2020 for an Olympics, 8 years down the track when we have the likes of skateboarding, karate, breakdancing, and other sports. And I use that, the term sport in inverted commas there, with all due respect to some of those.
Keep going, Daniel. Bitterness doesn't look good on you. Just move on.
Look,
you've got to admire the fact that these sports were able to get there.
You do. I do.
I wouldn't be shaking my head at the Olympic movement.
Agreed. And it shows that they've put it all together and they know where their priorities lie and they know how, their respective sports can benefit from something like the Olympic movement. Nick, what do you have? What's the latest? I know you're on the front gate of the BCCI there reporting for us on behalf of emerging cricket, but what do you have? What have you heard? What have you seen? What do you think has been made of all of this?
Well, as you said, they didn't say no, and that's the main progress. You mentioned that the conversation's just starting now. Well, it feels like it's been going on for well over a decade, and there's always we'll discuss it or we'll think about it.
We'll get to it.
So it was good that they didn't say no, because in the past the BCCI has been actively opposed to joining the Olympics. So it is progress in a way at a glacial pace, but it is still progress that they're at least not saying no. The official word is that they're going to clarify with the Olympic Committee the relationship to the Indian Olympic Association and the fear that is spoken about a lot with regards to the Olympics is that the BCCI doesn't want to lose its authority or autonomy in the face of the Indian Olympic Committee because of obviously internal disputes between the two organisations. But yeah, as you said, you look at England and the FA in England and football's in the Olympics, but that doesn't mean that the FA is controlled by Team GB. Team GB didn't even bother sending a team to the last Olympics because the FA basically didn't feel like organising one. So clearly, the fact that the BCCI is so much more powerful than the Indian Olympic Organisation, to me, indicates that those fears of losing their autonomy and being controlled by the Olympic Committee, I think that's very overblown. So perhaps there's some questions around revenue distribution and funding and whatnot, which those are always the kinds of disputes that get very bitter in cricket administration. But yeah, the word is that they're going to revisit the issue at a special general meeting sometime this year, hopefully early-ish, and hopefully they say yes and we can move on to trying to get it into the LA Olympics. But yeah, there was a lot of excitement when they didn't say no, and fair enough, in the past they have said no, but yeah, it wasn't as momentous as perhaps it sort of sounded like when they said that they didn't mind the idea of it.
Yeah, I've been holding back on my analogies in 2020, but one of my New Year resolutions is to bring in more in. What this reminds me of...
Oh, yes.
Here we go.
What this is to me is you've been asking the same girl out and she said no to you every time, and you've just pestered her and pestered her and pestered her.
It's chipped away.
It just chipped away. Just tap it in. And, instead of saying no this time, a bit like Lisa and Ralph, oh, look, okay. Look, I'll go with you to the formal, but look, I need to check first. I'm asking someone else, or got to check my schedule. So look, there was a chance to say yes with an if, but it does, yeah. So look, we talk about it a lot, and I know that everyone listening will be nodding away. I can imagine Chris Pearce as he's driving, kind of staring off into the distance, listening to the podcast. Love you, Chris. And it'll be like, yes, you guys talk about the Olympics a lot. It would be amazing, and it would be a genuine tears to eyes moment when the news comes through. And let's assume the world is back and up and running when it happens. But apart from going in 2000 when it was in my home city, I think that would be the first time I'd ever be booking tickets to go to Olympic Games to go and watch cricket in LA. And I know I'm just one cricket enough somewhere in the world, but I just think it'd be amazing. So, look, bang on with everything you said there, Nick, about the power control funding, and I guess cricket in India is that one of the few countries where they wouldn't be looking forward to the money from the Olympic Committee because they don't need it. And everybody always likes money, but they're not looking at the facilities or wanting to use it like literally 90% plus other countries around the world. Well, more if you look at the West Indies, and if you start breaking up all those, any associates. So we know that it was good news. Well, it could have been a lot worse, but onward and upward. 2028. It sounded like a long time away, didn't it, a couple of years ago? But since 2020's basically just been, deleted, and kind of like, we'll just, when you just like cut, like, yeah, exactly. You're just cutting the square out of 2020. You imagine like cutting the sticky sellotape right now to tape the two bits of paper together after cutting out 20 just to put 2019 into 21. But yeah, I don't know. What do you reckon, Bez? You going to come to LA?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And they're more than capable to host international cricket. And I still think T20 cricket is a viable format for the Olympic game. If they have to go to T10, I don't mind that either, because it's still cricket in my eyes. But I think T20 is still a more than realistic option. And let's just hope that India chooses cricket in the Olympics.
Two Ralph Wiggum references from the same episode in 5 minutes.
Go orange, go banana. That's what cricket's like in its Olympic aspirations.
Yeah.
Is the
if
banana.
You don't like Simpsons quotes, you're gonna hate 2021.
You're in the wrong place. But again, thinking of India, it's a good opportunity for them to win an Olympic gold medal. They've won 9 Olympic gold medals. 8 of the 9 have been won in a team sport, which is field hockey. They've won 1 individual gold medal in men's air rifle in Beijing in 2008. But apart from that, it's been very much an empty cabinet for India in their Olympic dreams. So it'd be a good opportunity for them on both men's and women's cricket to help with that gold medal tally at least. But again, to look at somewhere like Los Angeles, there are definitely other places in the world that it would be harder for cricket to get up and running, but the facilities are there. And even if they had to move interstate into another part of the country, we've seen it in many other Olympics around the world where they've had to move venues. I think the Melbourne 1956 equestrian was held in Stockholm due to equine issues or something like that. So
damn it, I was going to bring that one up. It's like, damn it, you got me.
Sorry.
And Beijing, they held the equestrian events in Hong Kong.
Oh, did they? I did not know that.
So it's been done before, and and you said about facilities, and one of the tick boxes, or one of the things about Olympic inclusion is the legacy of the facilities. But this can't be the only reason. If they put up temporary stands out at, what's the park in LA, Nicholas?
Woodley?
Yeah, Woodley International, that's right, where they held Division 4, and I've heard it's not in great nick at the moment. But, it's the Olympics. You can put up temporary stands. It's like, beach volleyball. Do you think those stands stay up,
We had it on Bondi Beach, guys. Come on, it's not hard.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah, we can't take that down. So, again, it can be done. And like you said, if it's T10, and I don't want to be flippant, but even if it was 6s, if it meant funding and exposure for the game.
Yeah.
The only problem for me looking at something like that is that knowing how a place like Hong Kong works, and they only fund the format of the sport that is in the Olympics or the Asian Games and keep the squad to that group, I'd like to think it's going to be a more, let's say, traditional, in inverted commas, format that will mean in other countries that I'm sure that have firm funding rules around Olympic sports as well, and who gets into Olympic funding and who doesn't, that it includes as many players as possible. That's my only little concern, having been all too involved in that in Hong Kong, and trying to get as many players covered by those salaries as they were full-time sports people because of that, but only the T20 team because of what they'd achieved in the T20 World Cup qualifiers in 2015. So that's anything I kind of come up against in my head when thinking about the formats. But if it's athlete numbers and we need fewer people, then it's like we'll change. Give us 5 minutes. We'll come back with a an 8-team 8-over format that will just get into the games. It's only upside.
Yeah, plenty of opportunity for cricket in the Olympics. We just need everyone to be on the same hymn sheet, singing from it, and trying to move cricket into the Olympics. But again, yeah, any format would do for us. And from, I think just about every associate member's perspective, any Olympic participation in any regard, whether it's qualifying, whether it's competing, whatever the format, it's so beneficial to everyone, and the funding and everything that goes with that. We've talked about it multiple times. I don't really think it needs to be repeated again, but here I am, end of year special, talking about it anyway.
Have we told everyone what's going to be on the end of year special? We haven't even opened the mailbag yet, have we?
No, we haven't. We've got a lot of listener questions towards the back end.
Yeah, we're half an hour in, and it's like we've just been, we haven't spoken for 2 weeks. This is what happens,
And my To be honest, my interaction with people has been scarce outside of a professional sense. I've caught up with a few mates, but yeah, haven't really had the chance to, it's been a weekly ritual for us for the best part of 2 years on it, just about, apart from a few weeks here and there. It did feel a little bit weird not recording last week. It was Christmas though.
You had a huge Greek feast to fill the gap, so I wouldn't be complaining too much.
Let's have a look at 2020 in review. And I think from a cricket perspective, from even, in the context of sport, cricket, I think, managed to squeeze out all that it could in a difficult year. We managed to have an under-19 Men's World Cup. We managed to complete a Women's T20 World Cup. Cricket World Cup League 2 was thrown into a bit of jeopardy. We did see some action at the start of the year, but it does look like that all of those matches will be played out in some format, in some respect at least. We saw international cricket pop up in parts of Europe. Vanuatu got a lot of exposure from all of their domestic cricket that went on, did very well. And we haven't talked about Shane Dietz becoming the women's head coach of the Netherlands just yet, but he did an amazing job in Vanuatu. Tim reminded me before that Taiwan managed to host cricket before anyone else in a time of a lot of trouble. Before we do look at some of these events in depth, Tim, I think cricket and cricketers have done very well to adapt in the situation that we found ourselves in. Associate cricket was front and center and top of mind for a lot of people who might not have seen it before. So in that regard, I think cricket did a very good job, at least, of adapting to the situation.
I was asked this, I think it was on the Gorilla Cricket podcast right at the start, and I did a very political answer. They asked me one question about player welfare, and I basically gave the same answer now, is that I think if we look at it from our point of view, from an emerging cricket perspective, we've talked about this a lot. I think the players are so used to having to adapt to different situations of working jobs, training in different countries, being in different places and coming together only briefly to play. It was only now, it was like, okay, well now you're probably stuck at home doing this to add to everything else, and you're going to have to train via Zoom. Or in Scotland, I went back and watched Kyle's EC Live he did back when you were happy to put your face on the screen, Bez, and him talking about how they weren't actually allowed to train officially anyway. And I don't think I heard it that first time he was talking, that because they'd been furloughed and were being paid by the government, they weren't allowed to officially train, like those kind of situations. But I think you summed it up before, is how well cricket had coped in the situation it was in. I think because there's not a lot of money coming into associate cricket normally, and that they haven't spent the commercial funds before they've come in, there weren't a lot of, I think, huge problems for associate teams, because they didn't have huge bills coming out the back end. They're generally relying on government funding, which hopefully was still coming. And as far as I'm aware, the ICC funding might have even been front-ended a bit to try and help out countries that were struggling. So in that case, I think some of the countries financially were actually better off playing no cricket, which is a bizarre situation to be in. And only when you start going up and start looking at the effect on the World Cup Super League, I think that probably shows the countries that could afford to be putting bubbles in places because they've got the TV rights flowing in. We saw those countries doing it, but those that don't have the millions and millions of dollars coming in for TV rights, and therefore they don't have the funds there that could be spent as an expense on bubbles. We've seen the likes of Ireland and Netherlands series be postponed. And from a Netherlands point of view, it was about crowds as much as it was about the cost to bubble. But I'm sure all those things were taken into account, which, in retrospect, looking at what's happening in Europe now anyway, it was probably the right decision rather than make it now, rather than wait until the middle of 2021 and to get in a situation like what happened with the Slam, which I know is completely different, but I just mean in terms of timing of making promises that you don't keep. So, I think Gideon's summary of how it has probably exacerbated some issues already there in global cricket. Yep, the issues around global event structure, they were there before COVID and have only been highlighted further, especially around the World Test Championship. And look, I know Rod Lyle, when he eventually listens to this, will probably, go kind of beetroot red angry at me. But if the World Test Championship is the casualty from this to try and fit in the global leagues and everything else, I'm pretty cool with that, because I think establishing these pathways to global events is really important. And I'm not going to say that Test cricket should be the last thing considered, quite the opposite. But I think that getting these pathways right, especially as we come into different cycles and trying to work out how many events we're going to have, that's the important part. But look, I just hope that it's highlighted some of the issues that are experienced by associate nations or smaller full members that have now been experienced by those sort of larger full members in a time like this, and how much world cricket needs to change the way it structures. And it's probably going to answering a question that I'm talking about later about sort of ideas about the future, but about pooling rights and about being cleverer with central pools of payments to players, both male and female, but also the way it's distributed and broadcast. So look, if we take a positive look at 2020, I think maybe cricket will realise that it needs to pull together better, or we may see it drop off in certain places around the world if it doesn't.
And as disappointing as it was for the men's T20 World Cup not to run in Australia in October, I remember thinking that, had we been in a position for Australia to host that tournament at that point, I think a lot of us made the same point, that I think a lot of the associate teams might have actually been half a chance, because the way that they've had to train over the years, is, as Tim mentioned, either independently or scarcely while juggling jobs and other professional endeavours, it would have meant that the playing field amongst teams would have been, I think, equal or more closer to parity than what they would have been previously without COVID. So it was a shame for cricket to be missing in terms of that World Cup, that T20 World Cup in 2020, which was just so perfect that the universe decided, you know what, no, you're not going to have it at all, and have it next year. Without trying to delve too much into the decision to have India still host the 2021 tournament, even with all those qualifiers going to 2021 in India and not in Australia, it will open the door for a few of the teams in some respects, but I do feel that there's a disadvantage for the likes of, say, the Netherlands. And we've talked about this before, where I think they really prepared their side, and Ryan Campbell prepared that side with Australia in mind, now have to pivot and play in the Netherlands. But looking at that team, they do have spin threats as well. So it's not all lost for them. But to go back, I suppose, to the start of the year and the T20 World Cup that was held, the Women's World Cup, we saw encouraging performances from Thailand. And I suppose, in a way, to kind of sum up 2020, the game that Thailand were almost certainly going to win was abruptly halted and ultimately ended by rain at Sydney Showground, which in typical Western Sydney fashion, a huge thunderstorm wrecking everyone's plans, making 150 plus against a team that looked pretty rattled by the assault of Chantam and co for Thailand. Nick, I remember being there with you at the showground and being in awe of what Thailand were able to put up that day. But I think Thailand overall gave a good account of themselves in that tournament. They did get off to a shaky start. They lost to the West Indies first up, although they did sort of push them as well, especially with the ball and in the field. But I think there were a lot of positives to take from Thailand's progress in that tournament, and I think it's only really up for them as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, well, I know we were both in the media box there when Thailand took 2 for not many against England, and there was a few shockwaves through there. Obviously, they couldn't keep that momentum up against one of the best teams in the world. But yeah, Pakistan had never chased anything close to 150, I think. So they were definitely in the box seat, and what an absolute what a harbinger of the year to come, wasn't it? That something so good just couldn't quite happen, and we just had to miss out. But obviously Chantam turned that innings into an appearance at the women's IPL Challenge. Obviously she didn't get much of a go in the actual team, but the small steps it drew some attention. And just looking a bit further beyond just Thailand, women's cricket in general in the associate world, there was a lot of cancellations, as we discussed. There was that series that was supposed to happen between Ireland and Scotland in December, but Germany got on the field against Austria, which I thought was great, and that was in a period when there was almost no cricket being played, so it was a good advertisement for the game and some of the interesting stories coming out of Germany. So yeah, I mean, I think associate cricket, as you sort of said, Tim, benefited, I mean, financially, in the sense that it's a pretty sad situation when you're better off not playing cricket, but more in terms of exposure, when they were able to sort of fill a bit of a gap. Obviously the T10 Blast in Vanuatu, which attracted huge numbers on the internet because there was almost no live sport going on. Various other associate tournaments, including the European Cricket Series, which again filled a bit of a gap in the market. So I think there were some positives in the sense that, associate cricket was able to get a bit of attention that it might not have otherwise throughout the year.
Yeah, Thailand, Vanuatu, Zambia. They're just the pop up ones that we saw anyway. The Taiwan one, just funny reading the piece that Isaac did after interviewing one of the players about how that all happened in a place that cricket's more or less unknown by the population. It's just amazing for the exposure these places got. Or we had pop up tournaments in Sri Lanka that weren't in Sri Lanka. That was another thing about
that was something.
Yeah, they're all wearing masks, and they're not actually the players that they purported to be after the actual players that the names were on Cricinfo. Text people saying, I'm not there, and that's not Sri Lanka. But
And just talking about some of the places where cricket did pop up in 2020, at least in a more public consciousness, I suppose the European Cricket Series Weston and his team managed to pivot, not just having the European Cricket League, but also to have those rolling series around in parts of Europe. I think when he jumped on EC Live, I think he said that there was basically a game of cricket or cricket on almost every day from June to Christmas. And we saw games pop up in Finland, Romania. We saw action in parts of Spain a few times. And I think that, I suppose that the quality of cricket in some places left a lot to be desired. But I think overall that the idea and the exposure of just showing people out there cricket around in these parts of the world, we talk about this a lot, but it is so important to just see players on screens and just having that exposure. And that kind of goes back to what the ECL wants to try and do for the next generation, is to put cricket front and center in the minds of European kids growing up, having aspirations of playing in a club competition and winning, the Champions League of cricket, and hopefully next year in a world that I dare say won't be post-COVID, but in a position where we are able to manage it a little bit better, having a 16-team tournament in that for now as well, adding more countries to that. It's just improved the idea of European cricket tenfold in the last 10 years. And I think when we look at some of the regions around the world where cricket is very much thriving, to look at, say, the Asian regions of, say, Singapore and Malaysia, where the national teams go from strength to strength. We talked to Matt Featherston in Brazil and South American cricket being stronger and stronger every year. I think Europe is the next hotbed of international cricket as well, because it's in that sort of public consciousness. And yeah, it might have taken the craziness of 2020 to evoke that, Tim, but it looks as if it's going to be a very competitive region in the next few years to come.
And there's been some really innovative ideas that have come out of that region as well. Just as you're mentioning those countries, we saw, I don't think we mentioned it yet, Malaysia include women in there, as in women in the men's team, I should say. And then, Singapore's announced this T10 league that's going to be mixed gender. So, to see how this will all work. But, if we look at it from a women's point of view, there is a formula that works. Go to Thailand, learn about Thailand, and look at that from a women's point of view. And I think it will be women's cricket that will be the vanguard of that growth out of that region and beyond. There's some nations popping up that weren't necessarily the ones that were able to get games up and running that have great potential, including in Africa. Look across Rwanda, Nigeria. We see the stories there, but also the UAE from a women's point of view. So it's to me, really, it's from the women's side that I'm going to be looking at from a growth point of view, especially as, I know we'll talk more about women's cricket as we go on today, but, the men's have the structures there in place already with the Cricket World Cup leagues, and I think it's how women's cricket can be structured better to support that growth, I think is really going to be cricket's challenge of the next decade.
Now, we've opened up the floor to a number of you guys asking questions for our end of year special, like we did last year as well when we were all together in Sydney. Unfortunately, not all together tonight, but well and truly in on the Mailbag special again. We'll mention, some of the other things that have happened in 2020 and a lot of our answers, I feel. So we will go through that now. Our first question comes from Captain Morgan at DSDoc97. Not entirely a question, but I'll let it slide on this occasion. Wanting to know about the Olympics. I think we've already answered a lot of that, but Interested in KKR's investment in the USA and Major League Cricket. Tim, I think you're probably the best person to answer this. What do you think that investment will entail, and what do you think the benefits will be for USA and Major League Cricket in the future?
Well, the credibility that that name brings, the attachment to the IPL, great already. But we've seen the name of investors, and it is a very Indian-heavy list there. So that credibility there, I think more what they're going to bring from a Major League Cricket in general point of view, their experience in the IPL, also in the Caribbean Premier League. And I guess from their point of view, they'll have another franchise where they can be running almost a 365-day operation, and they can be giving, I know that it's Major League Cricket's not going to be wanting to be seen as a second tier competition, but bear with me, but they can be giving their assistant coaches from KKR more exposure in those other events and whatnot. So in terms of like I said, the credibility that name brings, that they want to be involved in Major League Cricket, but it's not just KKR. It's that list of billionaires, from the CEO of Microsoft and Paytm and CTOs of Dropbox and whatnot, that I'm guessing they're going to want to return for their money. But the fact that they've been able to corral that list of people is a big tick for what Major League Cricket's going to be. I think we've talked about it a lot this year about what it means for actually developing the game in the country and the role that minor league cricket has to play, and then the development pathway. But overall, to the 7-word question without a question mark, I think that overall just is a great marker in the sand for perhaps when the Major League Cricket kind of broke into the mainstream newspapers in some of its biggest markets that it's trying to attract itself to, when that signing happened. So very good for them.
Yeah, the thing for me is just that, money's obviously important for running a cricket tournament, but it's not the only thing. And even this year, it was experimental and a trial run, but the minor league stuff that they did run, it didn't go very smoothly. The stream was a bit dodgy and it was all a bit choppy. So I think the fact that KKR, it's not just a financial investment, they're bringing their expertise and they're providing sort of logistical and administrative support. So I think that probably will be more valuable than any money that they're actually investing.
I think you guys basically nailed it there. The only thing I would probably add is that I think the one problem that USA Cricket has had for a long time now, it's never been the amount of money, it's never been the number of people willing to help the cause. It just seems that there's never really been a unified effort into pushing the game forward. But I think you can kind of make an exception here with KKR moving into that space where, on paper, they've got a pretty good resume in terms of cricket management and bringing in their own people to building, say, a particular team or a particular area, a part of the USA. So I think, a lot of positives will most probably come out of all of this. I think that, there is potential for this model to work for a number of teams around the country. But again, we do need to see a strong unified effort from a relatively new governing body and a new organisation in USA Cricket pushing the game overall forward. But I think the idea of having teams like KKR or businesses like KKR coming in and doing something like this, I think it will raise the competition around and it will bring people up with them. Kind of a rising tide floats all boats. Peter Della Penna analogy with that one. I'll jump into the next question before I talk too much. And this one's from Bo Nicholson, a friend of mine. So thanks a lot, Bo, for listening to the show and jumping in with this question. I think he might want a couple of AM signings for the Brisbane Heat because they haven't gone too well lately. He is from north of the border. With the success of some players from the emerging nations, who is the next big hit potentially in the BBL? Now, seen Sandeep return this week for the Hobart Hurricanes, bowled relatively well, and the Hurricanes managed to get a win after Maxwell and Poran were looking like they were destined to chase that target, only to fall short in a classic Stars collapse from what I did manage to see. But looking at the BBL and Sandeep's success, we've seen Tim David emerge as a real star, I think, for the Hobart Hurricanes this year as well. Lamachane and David being teammates. Probably good for Sandeep knowing that Tim David had his number in Asian T20 World Cup qualifying not so long ago. But boys, I'm sure we've got plenty of potential players here that can help Bo and his BBL team in the future. Who am I going to throw this to first? I'm going to go Nick. Nick, who do you have in your little notebook short list of players on your scouting radar?
Well, there's all the usual suspects that we talk about all the time. Guys like Bilal Khan, who bowls amazing Yorkers and swings at a mile for Oman. Gerard Erasmus from Namibia, probably
what a
the best
player.
batsman in associate cricket at the moment. Kamal Levrock, absolutely whacks it. Handy seam bowler as well.
Bongy.
Yeah, Bongy. Free Bongy.
Free Bongy.
McLeod from Scotland, Callum McLeod, who absolutely pummeled Rashid Khan in the World Cup qualifiers a couple of years ago, and also pummeled Adil Rashid in that famous win against England. So, bringing him in as an anti-Rashid specialist would probably work well. One less obvious pick would be one for me, a guy I've been pumping up for a while now, Nikolai Damgard from Denmark, who bowls very tidily with left arm ortho, and has over the summer he's developed into a very handy slogger as well. He hit a few handy innings for his club sides in Denmark, so I think he'd be a good shout.
Look, if they want a left-arm spinner slogger, they've got one in Brisbane already, okay? So they don't need to use up one of their overseas player slots. Come on, Bez, you go. You've written such a list here. I'm afraid of the ones that I...
Well, that's Nick, but look, personally, I think someone that has been slept on a little bit and has worked with a member of a BBL's team's coaching staff as well, CJ Amini. I think he needs to get a taste at some point. Leg spinning all-rounder. Bats in the middle order for PNG, but I could probably see him realistically sliding down a little bit, but churning out some vital runs, between, say, 7 and 8. I think he has it all. He's got the style as well. He's quick between the wickets. If I was a coach in the BBL, I'd certainly be having a look and bringing him in. And he works with Joe Dawes at PNG, and Joe Dawes is the assistant to Jason Gillespie at Adelaide Strikers. And we know Rashid Khan's potentially going away for Afghanistan's ODI Super League series against Ireland in a couple of weeks' time, and I don't think they really have much leg spinning cover there. So he would have been more than handy at the Strikers potentially. A couple of players that are obviously, I think Erasmus is a certain, almost a walk-up starter in terms of quality emerging players. Nick made a good point that Nasana Pukana could be a good option as well from PNG. I think JJ Smith would work perfectly in Australian conditions, and with the new power surge in the BBL this year, I think that probably would have freed him up as a bowling all-rounder, because I've never seen anyone bat like him as a bowling all-rounder, where he can still manufacture inside-out cover drives over cover against both pace and spin. I think he is a better batsman than I think even Namibia probably give him credit for. I think they've got a very strong batting lineup, and they don't necessarily need him in the middle order, but I think that for almost any other associate member country, I could see him easily batting in the top 6, potentially, probably at 6 realistically. And George Munsey.
Wax it.
We've seen him get a little bit more opportunity in the emerging game. I don't really think he took his chances in the Vitality Blast, unfortunately, but I think in Australian conditions on Australian wickets, I think him hitting the way he hits, I could very much see him flourishing in Australian conditions. But yeah, I've got to say that the Tim David's been a revelation for Hobart. He's almost the missing link there is kind of that lower order batting option, and he's handy in that power surge period, which I've actually been a fan of that change, having 2 overs elected in a power play rather than just 6 up front, and it does bring out the best in guys like David. So I think JJ Smith probably fits a similar bill, and he bowls, left arm seam, can bring it back into the right hander or push it across the right hander. I think he'd be a great choice.
Well, if you look at all rounders, I think from my point of view that fit that similar mould, and considering you two have just named every international cricketer for associate nations for the past 4 years, you don't really leave me much.
So what about Paris?
I wasn't going to say him, but from an all-rounder point of view, Karen KC is someone that you could maybe even be a bit of a, what have they called it? Your
X Factor?
Yes.
X Factor, cool. Someone like Karen Casey, X Factor, but again, someone there low down the order, bats, bowls. Patrick Matatava, Vanuatu.
Oh, yeah, great
I just
shout.
love to see him bat on good wickets. Norman Vanua. We haven't mentioned him either, and I think saw him in UAE save his country in that game against Kenya when they were, was it 6 for 19? I think, was it similar to what India was?
Yeah, they were in a lot of trouble. I can't remember exactly, but
Oh, they were like similar to us in Namibia. We basically looked at, bloody hell, dead and buried here. So those sort of impact players that you've already named the class players. Anchi wouldn't be able to do it, but again, class players like that, like Jared Erasmus. I have to, every time I hear his name, and I pronounce it like Nick does, but I can't. My mouth can't get that out. And they just got picked up in the Abu Dhabi T10 League as well. But Kushal Mullah from Nepal, he's young. What is he now? 16, 17?
Who knows?
He's going to be a star. So maybe he's one to, maybe not this year. But again, if he's part of the squad, someone like that could be as well. And I don't know whether we don't quite count him because he's a professional cricketer in the UK, originally from South Africa, but someone like Roelof van der Merwe. Can you imagine him? Imagine the role he'd play.
Another handy left-arm ortho slogger, yeah.
Yeah, he almost walks into most of these teams at the moment, if we're honest.
Yeah, and well, I don't know why he hadn't been considered anyway, because when they flew out Samit Patel last year for the Renegades, someone like Roelof, like he can bat anywhere through the order. So there are some good players in the emerging game there as well, even if you guys did name all of them. So but someone like getting Patrick Matatav, imagine getting him to like even one big bash game. Look, he could play a lot more, but the effect that could have on Vanuatu cricket. Yeah, there's so much talent out there, but it's also how they're working their rosters. And with this X factor, I don't know. Yeah, it's how they manage the list really, and what part they could play. But with the performances of some of the players at the moment, I don't want to get bitchy and moany, because the whole point of this is having more teams than there are states means that it's giving opportunities to players that we wouldn't see otherwise, because it would have been the same players getting picked, and having 8 franchises, or not franchises, 8 clubs means that we've got to see players the likes of Josh Philippi, from WA. Was getting a gig with the Scorchers, recognised, comes over, plays for the Sixers, and probably everyone thinks he's from New South Wales because that's where he's got his go. Or Darcy Short, again, similar, from the top end, trying to make it in the West, these are some really good stories for Cricket Australia and Australian cricket in general. So I don't want to poo-poo the idea of giving chances to players that might not have played state cricket otherwise. But again, there's enough talent out there that wouldn't be costing a bomb either to have them out there, that would be bringing quality cricketers into the Big Bash, but also supporting the game. Even if we only looked in the EAP region, there's enough talent around there. That's another way of looking at it too.
The other thing for me too, and looking at it as someone who has to study up on BBL cricket a lot, and seeing a lot of these overseas guys fly in and out and be replacement players for each other, the calendar in associate cricket it basically opens itself up for these guys to be fully available for the whole 6 to 8 weeks for the tournament as well. Sandeep is an exception because he was in a national camp. He then actually got COVID and was in quarantine, so that sort of delayed his stay a little bit. But say if Tim David was an Australian and he was playing as an international player for Singapore, you're laughing because he's there for 8 weeks and he's available whenever you need to call on someone like him. So there are guys like Amini and all the players that we mentioned here who are twiddling their thumbs, looking for the next opportunity in cricket and just to earn a keep. Paul Van Meekeren's there delivering Uber Eats to people. He'd love to be playing cricket out here. And just seeing these guys and the people doing the recruitment having to, move this jigsaw around and try and fit everyone in and make sure they've got overseas players available for the whole tournament. You kill 2 birds with one stone there. You don't have to worry about players' availability because they're not playing international cricket at that point, and you're giving players a go. I mean, I think you could almost make a case for 4 overseas players playing in the BBL anyway, because I don't think there is enough. I don't think those international players are pushing out excellent domestic cricketers. And I think if the BBL has any aspirations of being akin to the IPL or a tournament, of that substance, then yeah, I can't see why they can't pick 4 overseas players. And again, I can't see why, the cream of the associate crop can't jump in on that action too. We've given that question a great nudge. So Bo Nicholson will be very, very happy with what we've achieved there. Jeremy Slough, man, we know very well, Nick, a good friend of yours, wanted to know what happened to Ireland this year. Beat England and then no matches. I know COVID has affected all that, but I think overall quite a decent year in Irish cricket.
Yeah, they had a few cancellations towards the back end. They were supposed to play a test match against Sri Lanka, I believe, and that didn't happen. But the schedule is gradually filling up for 2021, and lucky for Jez, the Irish are playing against UAE and then Afghanistan all this month. They've got the Cricket World Cup League 2 series against Afghanistan, and they're stopping off to play the UAE as well. And that's basically what the League 2 structure was designed to alleviate, was the lack of matches and lack of consistency in their schedule. So, looking ahead, their schedule isn't too bad. The sort of summer, autumn period, they've got South Africa, which I don't think has been cancelled or postponed. They're definitely touring Netherlands. At this stage, we don't know what's going to happen with the virus situation. Zimbabwe's going to come over, and they've also got Afghanistan at home, I think, later on in the year. So they've got a few series coming up. So yeah, hold tight, Jeremy. You'll see the Irish in action in not too long. But it looking a bit more broadly, it is the kind of issue that is constantly facing the Ireland and Afghanistan as the newest full members, and trying to squeeze them into the schedule. Obviously we saw Afghanistan's test match against Australia get pushed back and sort of juggled around because Cricket Australia was trying to clear the deck for India. And this, as we've talked about a lot, the coronavirus has sort of exacerbated or highlighted a lot of problems that were already there in terms of the inequalities of international cricket. So I think Ireland, yes, they're full members, but in a lot of ways they're still treated as associates by the rest of the full members.
Yeah. Nate Hayes, a friend of the pod, a key member of the emerging cricket team, one of our favourites here. Huge shout out to Nate. He had a couple of questions lined up for us. And I tell you what, they made us think long and hard. And I'm just looking at them now before. We've got two big ones here. Let's start with this one. Each of you, that's you, Tim, and Nick, and myself. Each of you name one idea you like. Yeah, no worries. Each of you name one idea you like, or come up with an idea to put women's cricket front and centre. Also, the same question for associate cricket. For me, this is actually quite a difficult question. And I'm actually going to throw it to Nick first because I want to copy his answers. No, not really. I don't. But I'd love to know what Nick has to say on this.
Well, yeah, just one idea. I mean, that's, yeah. In a lot of ways, the two things are linked, I think, especially in terms of the way that women's cricket is able to get a bit more cut through, I think, in some associate countries, because the countries don't have an established history with cricket. So in a way, you look at Australia and the history of the men's cricket team and the cultural significance of that. And I think that was a bit of a roadblock in the past to people showing interest in the women's game, because there was so much history with the men's side of things. So I think in places like Brazil or even Hong Kong, where you were involved, Tim, the women's cricket got a bit more attention locally because football was sort of traditionally a male sport, and women getting involved in that was a bit harder. So cricket was able to position itself as a gender neutral sport, or a sport for everyone. So in terms of putting women's cricket front and center and putting associate cricket front and center, they kind of help each other. In associates, putting women's cricket front and center helps you develop the game, which sort of feeds off itself. In terms of countries where cricket is already popular, it's a slightly different question, and I think, Cricket Australia, I have complained about them in a lot of ways, but one of the things they've done a really good job at is promoting women's cricket, and basically it just needed the investment to show people that they should take it seriously, and it might not have the same sort of cultural cachet as the men's cricket, but it's still cricket. And a lot of Australian cricket fans have responded to that. And basically women's cricket here is generally viewed in terms of, well, great, more cricket. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, for countries where cricket's already an established sport, it's a lot easier to put the women's game at the front, because people are willing to watch cricket. So you've already got that step. And in countries where cricket is a minority sport, I think putting women's cricket at the front, it gives it a competitive advantage against other sports. So that's my long-winded answer, is that they're very much linked.
I agree wholeheartedly. A lot of these initiatives, I got a little bit more detailed in me thinking about it. And it's something we talk about on the men's side a lot, or maybe assume that we're talking about the men's side, but having a centralised pot for global leagues on the men's side and the World Cup leagues. I'll do it on the women's side as well, in terms of revising the women's championship and actually turning it into a global league system that has divisions. However we do it, it's not a matter of not caring, but I don't know how that could work. But whether it's regionally or whether we do it by strength, but doing that from the top down. So unlike World Cup leagues that are funded and the money goes to associates to host, I would take that money out of the funding to full members and say, well, we're actually going to fund this centrally, and we're not only going to pay for the tournament, but we're also going to have a minimum player pot. They'll be paid players. We're going to minimum income level, and it will also be broadcast because we'll sell the rights separately, just like the ICC has done for associate cricket. And that's international cricket. On the flip side to that, and I know I talked to Jared at length about, is T20 cricket broken?
Good podcast, that.
Men's T20 cricket is broken.
Yeah.
Women's T20 cricket is not broken. There's a real opportunity to create a global league or regional leagues that tie in and help the countries of which they'll be hosted in, but don't create these kind of siloed super leagues that end up dominating and not allowing anyone else to grow around there. So whether it's I don't want to say travelling circus because that kind of belies what I'm kind of getting at, but actually having a league that is played in different places around the world but has franchise teams that have local representation when they're playing in those particular places around the world. They actually have chances for more women to play professional cricket, and whether we have quotas in terms of players from country numbers, but to make sure that it's just not all filled up from certain countries. I just think there's a real way to bring professional women's sport even higher. And maybe it's an either or. We look at the national team game and think that that's the opportunity if we know that those countries are going to be funded and we don't worry about T20 franchise cricket, but also really start looking at how a professional women's T20 league could work, because there's really only two running now, with the 100, we'll count the 100 as T20, but we've got the WBBL
Yep.
and what the 100 is going to be. In the women's IPL, look, India's big enough that they could squash any of these if they really wanted to, but they haven't done it yet. There's a real chance here for cricket, and I mean in general, it might even be the ICC doing it. I don't know, or someone clever enough to see that there's a real opportunity here to invest, and it should be done. It shouldn't just be a financial thing, and that's why I think if we do it out of the national pots and we actually encourage it that way, and I know telling the full members that we're going to take a couple of mil off you a year or whatever because we're going to run it centrally, but there's a lot of conversation that would need to happen there. But I think there's I think I mentioned it earlier about what women's cricket needs to take that next step, and it's having a global league system. Even if we say T20 only, just for this argument, for Germany to know, for them to be playing more often, more quality cricket more often, to get up the ladder, just as the men's teams were able to do from World Cricket League Division 8 back in the late 2000s. I think that's what women cricket needs, and we can actually start it. We're doing it from scratch, so we can go back and say what worked, what didn't, and there's enough money in the pot. So that's my answer from a women's point of view. And look, I talk enough about centralised pots and global leagues for AMs, and I think the ICC has gone down the right path with selling the commercial rights to those pathway events. That would have been my idea. The ICC have done it. So rather than trying to tweak, my only answer about putting AM cricket front and centre is when the ICC decides who that goes to make sure that it can be watched by as many people as possible. And the ICC, although they've sold the commercial rights, that they're able to use their network as well. Their 35 million followers across their social media assets and channels, I should say. You can see what's happening in the moment with the players pushing back around using their images for World Cups and whatnot. I know 92 cricket nations that would love their players to be front and centre of all these things, and there's a real opportunity here for the ICC to own it. And I don't mean in a my bat and ball, I'm going home, but to own this cricket and to really celebrate it with an OTT, as in an over-the-top technology answer from streaming with this new partner they're going to have. So that's my answer for AM cricket, and hopefully we're on our way there already.
Look, I think women's cricket, they're sitting on a gold mine. Everyone is sitting on a potential gold mine of women's cricket here, because I can't see why cricket can't emulate the likes of, say, I look at, say, international tennis and the way that both men's and women's tennis is kind of weighed up. I can't see anything stopping cricket being at that level of relative parity, although the one difference being is that women's cricket works better when tournaments are standalone. I don't think you could ever go back to a situation where men's and women's tournaments are held concurrently in an attempt to equalise the game. I very much think that CA got it right by having the WBBL being a standalone tournament and putting all the qualities of women's cricket aside. Talk about, the over rates are better. You get through the games faster. The strategy around women's cricket and how totals are compiled from a batting side of things, I think is actually one of its key strengths. But looking at, say, a model like, and Tim, you definitely talked about this, something like what the Rugby Sevens World Tour does, where all the countries basically go around to different places on a weekend and have a tournament. If you had similar to what, and I was talking to Lisa Stalaker about this, she wanted to have a tournament like this in Singapore in 2014. The idea didn't quite get off the ground. And I think Sean Martin, who I'm pretty sure is involved with Fair Break Global, Tim, you might be able to correct me if I'm wrong there, but they had the idea in regards to something like that then. But to bring it to your idea, Tim, which I think it definitely has legs, is to have, say, 4 or 5 teams that are made up predominantly of some of your best international women's talent. They travel around different parts of the emerging world, and then the players that actually slide into those teams are players from that particular country. So, for instance, I don't know, we had the tournament in Thailand or in Singapore or Hong Kong, and then you'd have, say, 5 or 6 players in each team already selected, the cream of the crop from the full member game, and then you have kind of like a draft where you pick Thai players, Singapore, Malaysian players to fill up those teams, and you kind of do it in a world tour kind of format. But I think that's probably a very fantastical idea. I don't know how realistic something like that would be, but the beauty of women's cricket is that it's exciting, and working on women's cricket this year at the WBBL, absolutely loved all of it, to be honest. I would do it again tomorrow if I could. And the talent that everyone brought to that and the skills that are on show are incredible. And, we've got world champions in a sport, on our doorstep right now in Australia. And again, we have the likes of India who are probably able to put up a women's IPL tomorrow if they had to match that of the men's IPL in terms of teams and numbers. And they haven't quite got there yet, which I do scratch my head a little bit in regards to. And I think we're very behind that. But, as Nick said, Cricket Australia has done several things wrong in its past, but one thing that it's smashed out of the park is its promotion and the way that the WBBL has run, because it didn't work when they were the pre-game entertainment to a men's BBL game. It's worked perfectly. I see men go to WBBL games. There's no reason why that can't happen in the associate world and, on a more global context. I've talked a lot there and I've kind of rambled, so I'll jump straight into Nate's second question.
You're not going to answer about AM cricket, though?
Well, the best way to put associate cricket front and centre is to have more teams at a World Cup. That's probably the easiest answer in all of that. But I do think that
was the gorilla in the room, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Someone had to say it.
Yeah, not a gorilla on the table.
The World Cup qualifier, I think, from an associate point of view, I think the World Cup qualifier has such potential to be such a huge event that introduces people to associate cricket. And I think that we've heard the factoid thrown around that it's one of the few global events that actually turns a profit in the emerging game. But that World Cup qualifier was brilliant last year. And to have it split into 2 lots of 8, it might work. It could well work if we do get the exposure that we want out of that. But I think just to play on the emotions that associate cricket has had for all this time. The reason why we've all fallen in love with associate cricket is that there's so much bearing on every single game. And the likes of a World Cup qualifier, there's a lot bearing on that. It's the chance to represent your country at a World Cup in the sport that you've endeavoured to be a star or, a high-profile player at. So a lot of those guys have put their whole life into cricket, and I think the World Cup qualifier has the potential to really encapsulate everything that the human drama of sport has in it. And cricket is such a great metaphor for life. You know, you can go out there feeling $1 million and get out for one, but it just adds another dimension to all of that. So I think, from an associate point of view, I think make a bit more of a song and dance about World Cup qualifier global events.
Just on, as you mentioned that, talking about the global qualifier, and I turned my nose up as you kind of said about the split event, because it takes the onus away from a single event. But then one thing that annoyed me about the event was the superfluous semi-finals and finals.
Yes. That's a good point.
And look, I know all too well that a third place finish was so important in one event for us in particular in Hong Kong that got us Olympic funding. But having these split events into 2 8-team events are going to mean that I'm guessing those 2 spots, how many spots? They're playing for 4 spots, aren't they? So each event will play for 2. So it's going to go down to the semi-finals at least, a bit like the women's T20 World Cup qualifier, that it will go a lot further to the end of the event, rather than having a couple of days of cricket that actually doesn't mean anything in the context of the spot. I'm not sure how they're going to play that. If they're 2 8 teams, are they going to play each other once and then just rank it that way, or are they going to go into finals? If you got answers, let me know. But I think that's I hadn't even thought about it that deeply when you sort of mentioned, but how good that event has been. And the one that you're talking about is the 2015 event that I think blew all expectations out of the water, because that was the first time they'd really invested in ICC TV money into the production of that, and it was great. I remember being in Ireland and going to a mate's house there in Belfast and turning it on Sky. There are the games that are on, and that's front and centre, exactly as Nate Hayes asked about.
There you go, Nate. I hope you're happy. That's only one of his 2 questions as well.
Exactly. It's only, geez.
Second question. He wants us to reimagine one athlete from another sport as a cricketer. Who wants to go first on this one? This one I actually probably put a little bit too much thought into.
Well,
I've seen Nick's answer, yes. So I'm not sure if we should have the guy with the long answer go first or last. You decide, Mr. Host. The fact that Nick had already done this, that he'd done this before the question, I think that we need to make that clear to all the listeners that, I've actually already done this, and only with Canadian sports people. It was a real quiet day in Gosford that week.
It's always a quiet day in Gosford, mate. You don't know what it's like.
Exactly.
You go, Nick. This is your chance to shine.
This is a juicy full toss for me. Yes. So in one of the older Bradman cricket games, I made a Canadian celebrity team, which included a lot of non-sports players as well. But from the sports side of things, I had Steve Nash from basketball as a swing bowler, bit of a sort of Damien Fleming sort of mould, very accurate considering his great record on free throws in the NBA. I had Wayne Gretzky from Oz Hockey, obviously. Obviously, he's a brilliant fielder, capable of executing a run out from anywhere. His technique would be watertight, and basically he's the Don Bradman of ice hockey. So, shots all around the ground, adept at piercing the gap. Another one which dates this project of mine was Anthony Bennett, who was picked up in the NBA as, I think he was the number 1 draft pick.
I think he might have been, yeah.
Yeah, mid-20 teens, but really fell off the radar. But anyway, so I had him down as an intimidating fast bowler, using his height to generate some frightening bounces. Obviously the basketball thing being extremely tall and athletic. Some non-sports ones off the top of my head were Geddy Lee from Rush. So I had him down as a bit of an A.B. de Villiers, very creative, all the trick shots reflecting Rush's prog rock, a lot of creativity in their music. The astronaut Chris Hadfield, I had him down as a Glenn McGrath style line and length, because to become an astronaut it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of self-control. And another one that I liked was David Cronenberg, the supernatural horror film director, as a bamboozling leg spinner, terrifying the batsman with weaving a web. I could go on, but I'll let you guys have a chance.
Tim, are you asleep yet?
That's extraordinary. Look, all I'll say is it takes all types. Look, for me, there are other sports apart from cricket. The NBA ended for me in about 95. When I stopped trading cards. So my Manute Bol, 7'6", 7'7", Sudanese. If you're going to grow the game in Sudan, do you not want a guy who's 2.3 meter tall running in with a new rock? Can you imagine that? I guess that's a bit of an obvious one, but no. Look, I think Nick is he's done the time here, and I just immediately go to what do you know best here, Tim? It's like the Cronulla Sharks of the 1990s, and so now if you look at the pictures side by side, and their builds, like Peach is probably more of a a little bit more sporty, can run a bit faster, but Mohammed Nadeem from Oman and David Peachy, I think they're
separated at birth.
They're just cross-cultural lookalikes.
Yeah.
So I can imagine him just running in some cheeky little induckers and whatnot, and then batting the top order all day. And Brett Kamali at that time, I don't know, probably behind the stumps. But I don't know, give me another 13 years and I'll go and research all of the sports people of a country that I'm not from, like you are, but and to go through and put together that is a podcast. That is a Deep Point podcast.
Yeah.
I would
specifically for Nate.
I vote that we cut this out and we just recast it as Nick's Dip Point on Canadian sports people who could be cricketers. I read it. I read it in the paper in front of me, and I couldn't believe I had to stop halfway. It's like
this isn't even all of them.
Look, it's like you have run out of characters in your Dropbox paper document. Yeah. It's like supernatural horror film director. It's like where is this going? This is going somewhere amazing. Anyway, so that's it. Maybe I should have put more effort into this, Nate. I'm sorry. I'll come back to you another time. I could basically name what cricket position the entire sort of 96 Sharkies team could be in, but I would say that's too niche. But you've just taken us down a canal of nicheness.
Yes. Tim, I don't want to make you feel old, but
you don't want me to. I can make myself feel old. Don't worry.
Manute Bol's son is now in the NBA. That's how long you've been out of out of the NBA, and his name is Bol. Bol. So you don't need to waste too many brain cells trying to remember that name.
No, and look, there's only one position in cricket that they could play.
Well, exactly.
That didn't even come to mind. I just thought tallest basketball player I know. There's also Georgie someone, Mahazen or something at the same time, was from Russia or Georgia or whatever. So if we're trying to grow the game there, so look, I'm not just going to go down the pathway of naming the tallest basketball players I know, because we've already been on for an hour and 3/4 at this stage. So
before I get into I've got two that are two rather obvious ones, but I did want to make a point, Nick making reference to the great one, Wayne Gretzky. My favorite all-time piece of trivia is that him and his brother Brent hold the record for the most NHL combined points by two brothers, so goals and assists put together. They hold the record as the most combined for two brothers. Wayne has 2,857. Brent has 4. It's one of the best pieces of trivia. I think I use it every single time I run a trivia night. I run that one. But to go to I've got 2. And a couple of pretty obvious ones, I think. I think Tiger. Tiger is a middle order batsman, I think would be incredible. Not only the range of shots that he has and the ability to manipulate the ball around trees and stuff, hitting his draws, fades, his stingers, whatnot, turning that into inside-out cover drives and reverse sweeps and being crafty on the putting green. I actually think, too, that the best part of his game is concentration. I think he would have been able to bat long Brian Lara periods of time.
Yeah, I'm thinking a bit of Ponting crossover with him. Actually, thinking about his game and his wrist. That's what I'm seeing in my mind.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a good shout. Yeah, I like that. And the other one, and to kind of stick with the basketball here, just from a height standpoint, I would have liked to have seen a red kookaburra in the hands of Luke Longley. I think him at 2 meter, whatever, 7'2" or whatever he is. Good luck playing that.
I'd give him a long blade.
Yeah, those long levers, Tim.
We discussed this before and we weren't going to say that word.
We weren't going to say it. I'm sorry.
But then you think about, we've had tall cricketers, Tom Moody, 6'6" or 6'7". It's like,
not that tall.
Yeah, new level. No, I like it. I feel like I'll let the team down without my research. It's Shaquille O'Neal. I thought about him.
But I feel like he's not mobile enough.
No, what's he going to do?
Yeah, he'd be the classic 7'7" guy who actually bowls left arm orthodox, isn't he?
Doing the Suleiman bend.
There is nothing wrong with tall people bowling left arm or orthodox.
Suleiman Darren Cutler over there.
Yep, my brother's name's Ben, but that's another conversation. Anyway.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah.
I hope we've given that a good nudge for you, Nate. I think we have. To Cam Allen, one of our patrons, shout out to Cam. He's actually in your neck of the woods, Tim. He tells us, before I get into his question, he's had to move back to Oz with the COVID situation in Europe. He's heading back to Switzerland, hopefully a few times over the next year, but we'll be back in Australia. But the question that he did want to ask was surrounding the Owen Morgan coaching analyst signals from the dugout. And he did acknowledge that this wasn't necessarily just a question from emerging cricket, but in terms of the overall sanctity of international cricket, I think it's a very good question. He wanted to know, is there a fairness issue in all of this here? Because realistically, how many teams in the world can afford an analyst like that, which gives them another competitive advantage over the rest of the field? What do you guys think? Now, to be honest, I look at cricket as very much a game that is coached and run by the players on the field. I think that cricket has a very different dynamic between players and coaches, where the captain of the team ultimately has kind of the ultimate vote in the decision of how things are played out. I don't know how different that is in regards to 2020 and limited overs cricket, where, we do see more analysis and analytics feed into the game, and matchups are spoken about. And you can micromanage a little bit more in T20 cricket based on the number of balls and who's facing, who's bowling and whatnot. Where do we see this? I think this is a thing that will only evolve in the future unless, things dramatically change from a governing body standpoint. But Tim, where do you kind of see all of that playing into international cricket, or in fact in other franchise domestic cricket, or even in emerging and associate cricket?
Yeah, look, I don't have a huge issue with it, and I would rather signals from the balcony being worked out in seconds than someone running gloves out and wasting time.
That's a great point, yeah.
Yeah, so look, the messages are getting out there anyway, and I love your point, and I was on a date the other night.
Let's go.
Let's go. And I was genuine questions from my companion about the game and about captaincy and coaching, and she was amazed at how much power rests with the captain. Not quite sure about who makes a decision about who does this and who. It was great sort of answering those questions of someone looking at it from a new, as a new fan, but from different angles. And I think that's one of the great things about cricket is that how it's run. With a captain on the field, how much control that person has, and how this could potentially, does it reset the balance? Because the captain will be going out there sometimes with the numbers in their pocket saying about certain players, certain matchups, especially in T20 cricket, all about matchups and partnerships. But if they're able to do this, go for it. If it ends up being with a tap of the year and a hat cap as the captain's looking up there, then super. That brings an element to the game that's not detracting from the spectators' game, bringing other skills potentially in it. But like I said, as long as it's not wasting time, and if that means that gloves aren't being run out again, but in saying that, T20 cricket now, every over there are players going out there with a helmet or with drinks or with gloves. So, but yeah, on the base of it, no, I'm fine. There are bigger things in the game to worry about. This isn't one of them.
Yeah, it was interesting when it sort of all came out. My first thought was that Bob Woolmer is shown to be ahead of his time once again. The earpiece ploy with Hansi Cronje, feeding him instructions from the dressing room over a microphone. So that was quite interesting. But yeah, in terms of the fairness thing, I think just the fact that they have the money to pay all of these backroom staff, that in itself, it's not just analysts, it's the dietitians and the psychologists and the massage therapists and all the rest of it. That's always just going to be an issue of uneven resource distribution, and the richer teams have always been able to afford better staff. And so I don't think it's anything different in that sense. And I know quite a lot of the top associates are definitely putting that as a priority. We have James Hilditch with the Dutch, works a lot with stats and analytics for Cambo. I know the Scottish have hired our friend Jared Kimber actually on occasion. So they are trying to. They're trying to compete, but it's tough being able to afford it when there's a lot of other things that you need to put money into. I guess the only sort of thing that sticks for me is that I guess I agree, Tim, about the time wasting, and these messages get out there anyway, and there's nothing more frustrating than seeing people changing gloves and bats and helmets every couple of balls, and that's extremely irritating as a fan. But so if your hand signals cut that out, I'm all for it. But it does shift the game a little bit away from, as you were saying, Bez, from it being completely the captain's prerogative to being more the kind of the dressing room, the coach whispering in their ear, perhaps literally. But yeah, I think overall, I think it's probably good if they're going to save time.
But you say that. I think watching some of the interviews during the Big Bash, them deciding when to take the power surge, some of them saying, well, it's basically the coach's decision and it's going to come down from them as opposed to players in the centre. So it's already happening. I don't think it'd be shifting. Oh, look, I guess, but if they're allowed to do it and it's highlighted, you may see more analysts do it. But like I said, I don't think that's the issue, because I think it's already happening. And you mentioned, Hong Kong's had a full-time analyst as long as I'd been involved in since, and he's now moved on to become a women's coach as well, but still travels with the men's as analysts. So I think it's something that emerging teams have recognised of the importance, and and what's been mentioned, the physios and psychologists and whatnot, they're there as well. They're just not there full time activating almonds whilst on tour. They'll be there potentially on tour only and on part time in between. We're not talking about backwater amateur cricket when it comes to the upper echelons of associate ranks anyway. And looking to think that maybe this will give more credence to the numbers, and players will start taking notice because of where cricket is going from a sort of a Moneyball point of view. And this is only just a step along the way of cricket becoming a lot more data driven, as opposed to, this guy can't hit him. Well, actually, we've done the research.
Yeah, just to kind of wrap up on that, I don't really have too much to add that hasn't already been said. I think Tim makes a really good point that, these messages are being thrown out all the time by people bringing out new gloves and getting drinks of water. I think I watched, it was either today or yesterday, watching some of the BBL coverage, and there was calls for new gloves and a new drink, a drink of water 4 overs into an innings, which I find a little bit absurd. So I think if it does improve the speed of the game a little bit, it could be one of those things that is actually a real blessing in disguise.
If someone's able to get out there, which they are at the moment, and give a helmet to Maxwell for the quick bowl and take it away, if they're able to sprint out there and swap it and get back, I've got no problem with that. It's those moments that is delaying the game. I think it's one of the biggest frustrations over T20 cricket. So anything that would slow it down, absolutely not. And this is not one of those things. I think is my final takeaway.
Yeah. All right. We're into the back end of the questions, and this question's from me to the pair of you. Well, I suppose 2 questions. I can roll them into one. Your personal favourite cricketing memory, or I suppose any memory in general for 2020, and what are your wishes for the year coming up?
Put us on the spot there. Look, travelling to Perth and watching Thailand make their World Cup debut, something that I will never forget. Unfortunately, not being with you guys at the showground, I can't really use that as my memory. I was sort of watching it online, so I won't steal that for you. Good thing for me, the goodwill towards Vanuatu when they got their blast up and running, and with everybody watching it. I think the positivity from the sort of global community about the game there, the way it was projected in a very approachable manner by Dietzy and team, I just think it was just the kind of what the world needed at that stage. People loving playing the game, being able to be watched by everyone. In a world that we didn't have a lot to cheer about, that was something great. And cricket wishes for 2021, wow. Well, we're already there. And to see the calendar bulked from Q2 onwards, I can only hope that's able to happen, because from a cricketing point of view, I don't want to getting the vaccine out there and getting people healthy is priority number one. But I would hate to see the back end of this World Cup cycle truncated and a start going on rankings or something to be putting teams into qualifiers. I'm already halfway through an opinion piece. I actually stopped a bit about using ranking positions at all for the men's T20 World Cup qualifiers was wrong, because we should have been having the likes of Zimbabwe and Nepal back in regional qualifiers to try and get as much interest as possible with these teams that haven't been able to play, get them back playing as much as you can, especially in ICC events. That's the last thing I'd want to look to the back end of 2021. If we've been not able to play Cricket World Cup 2 or T20 World Cup qualifying events that we're supposed to, what happens? And that's just a real fear for me. So I'm just hoping that we can get all that cricket in, because by that stage as well, the new commercial broadcast agreement will be up and running, and I can't wait to be watching as much of it as possible, whether it's from a couch or from live when we're allowed out of the country again.
Yeah, I think that's definitely my wish for 2021, is just that the games won't be cancelled. Like there's so much cricket coming up for associate countries that I think it's going to be hard keeping up with it all. So just the fact that it's happening, and hopefully it does still happen, that's basically my only wish. Whether we can get there or not in person, I don't know. Yeah, it all depends on the virus and the vaccine and whatnot. But yeah, in terms of best moments from last year, I think I'll let you have the showground one, Bez. No,
because I've got another one.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So definitely, just following Thailand in general, and obviously big shout out to our friend Nish, who was working there as the media rep for Thailand, and doing a bit of EC work on the side. Just being able to sort of be there as an emerging cricket team, and that, you know, emerging cricket's coverage of the tournament was just fantastic. One little one from my perspective as a Canadian fan was seeing the US get bowled out for 35 by Nepal. That was great comedy for me. Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, just Germany getting on the park against Austria, although Austria did struggle, but, you know, setting some world records and generating a bit of interest in German women's cricket.
I think that day at Manica when Thailand played England was great for a number of reasons. I remember we recorded that podcast, sat one by one across this bed trying to record because we couldn't find a table to record at. And the best way we could do it was we had one microphone and we were handing it. I think I was in the middle and I was handing it to you on the left and Nish on the right to answer.
Not very COVID safe in retrospect.
In retrospect, no, but thankfully I don't think it had reached our shores at that point just yet.
That sounds like a drinking game, doesn't it? Spin the microphone.
Spin them.
Carry on, Bez, sorry.
England were 2 for 7, and I just remember the media centre was so dominated by English writers, people covering the event. Actually, it travelled out to Australia for the tournament, and just the gasp in the room when England were 2 for 7, when Danny Wyatt was caught by Langprasad. It was actually a really good catch too.
Amazing catch, yeah.
And just remembering the nervousness actually at that point around, and I think deep down we all knew which way that game was going to go eventually, but to be in that position, I thought was incredible. One personal moment from that, and Nick, I need you to kind of back me up on this actually happening because it was so awesome.
Oh, I think
you know where this is going. So Latte, the left arm orthodox spinner, bowled
Soraya,
bowled a waist-high full toss. I think it was to Nat Siva, and it was given a no ball, and it was hit for 4. And I don't know how many listeners would know, but when you're actually in the media centre, you can actually hear the commentary of the feed actually being played for you, so you can kind of pick up on stump cam and stuff like that. And I remember the balls hit to the boundary, and I just said to Nick, "Oh, that's a gift." And then the next thing that everyone else in the room hears is Ian Bishop's commentary. That's a gift. And the whole room's just turned around and looked as if to say, like, you somehow on the same page as Ian Bishop. There's plenty of worse people in the world to be on the same page as, so I'll take that every day of the week. But one more other memory that I did really enjoy, and it was from the Under-19 World Cup, was we saw Japan play at that tournament, and we knew that it was going to be tricky. We knew how they qualified for that tournament. In all of that controversy, one of the great stories was to see Japan take on the likes of England and India, and they played Nigeria as well. And I remember watching a little bit of the games that we did manage to get on the feeds because they didn't show all of them. But there was a lot of talk of, a couple of the Japanese players who showed glimpses of of some real quality in the qualifiers. We talked about Marcus Thurgate a lot, but there was a kid by the name of Shu Noguchi who stood up to both the Indian attack and the English attack. I think he made 20 odd against England, and I think he made 31 against Nigeria. And I really thought that he was actually a great image and a great role model for what associate cricket can be. And then reading a little bit more into his story further on in the tournament, he was raised in Sano, which we know is the cricket city in Japan, and he's actually been exposed to cricket from a very young age. So it proves to me that it doesn't necessarily matter where you're from. If you're brought into cricket from very young, and you listen and you develop your skills from, in many different ways, the sky is the limit. And I think someone like Noguchi just shows everyone that, which I thought was quite strong. And yeah, when we were doing our sort of players to watch under 21, when there wasn't much cricket going on, we tried to sort of profile Shu's story a little bit better. But I think, he's one that I'll definitely be looking out for in 2021 and beyond. But yeah, my wish is just to call more live cricket with you guys. I had so much fun doing it in Namibia, and yeah, 2020 wasn't ideal. There was a few things we had plans on doing, but unfortunately that didn't materialize. So yeah, I mean, it is a pipe dream still to see the vaccine being rolled out, and Australia very much sort of at the back end of all that, because we thought we had it covered already, and it turned out that no, we didn't. There was a few more cases to roll in. But look, yeah, with a lot of associate cricket, just being on a couch, just watching cricket almost as a fan, but doing our stuff here will be great. And yeah, calling any of it will be a bonus, because it's a lot of fun to do, and it's a lot of fun to do with you guys as well.
Going to try and get 3 ODIs in one day, Bez?
Oh, God, yeah.
Oh,
I don't think so.
If only there's 3 games, you could have gone between 3. But to your point on the gasp in the dressing room, the same thing happened in Perth. They were only defending 79, but they had the West Indies 27 for 3, and then LBW was given out against Campbell. And they would have been 27 for 4. And when that happened, you say gasp, in that room, there was a gasp and a nervous cheer. There was, not from me, it was a loud cheer, but it was like a real quiet. It was like everyone in this room is going for Thailand but can't make it known. Like there was the inhale was massive. Like for you guys, oh no, England are collapsing again. But in that room, there was a real palpable, like that. There's an energy that this team brings to the game, that this genuine enjoyment, that fulfillment that they get from it. So you had to go back and just look at it as we're talking at the scores, because I'm like, geez, because they didn't lose another wicket in the end. They put on another 52 to get the runs. That was Campbell and Stefani Taylor. Any team 4 for 27 in a World Cup, you never know what could happen after there. So just another little from the press box story there, and to see what a team like Thailand can bring to world cricket, and all the power to them. Just too bad that the proposed set of tournaments in the future, originally put up by the ICC, have more tournaments but with fewer teams, and they will have fewer chances to be making global events. So we can only hope that. I know that Imran Khawaja was talking about, I think, backing that structure, but who knows? If we get fewer events but with more teams in there, it might not actually work out that badly for associate nations if these events are bigger than the ones that have originally been proposed. And I think about that more actually from a Thailand point of view, rather than looking at the men's teams. I sort of think, well, if this wasn't a 10-team event, they wouldn't have had the chance, because if it was only 8, it would have been really tough. But anyway, sort of going off the path a little bit there. But I guess that comes to what we hope in the next year, is when they start making decisions about future events that, like you said, how we get front and center by having big World Cups. But now that the rubber is really starting the road in terms of looking at events for the next 10 years, really, because they're looking at it from until the next cycle, which is 24 to 2031. So we can only hope that we see events befitting a global game.
The other thing at Manuka was just the very subtle fist pumping from Nick and I every time something good happened. It's like,
you should have seen me in the box in the UAE watching Hong Kong against Oman. That was not like I was quiet, but I was like people just looking at me as I'm dislocating shoulders as I'm cheering. But look. look, anyway.
Brilliant to catch up with you guys as always. To everyone who's listened throughout 2020, thank you for being a part of our journey. We've been able to catch up and chat to so many great people in the associate and emerging game over the last year. The circumstances weren't great, but yeah, the likes of Jonty Rhodes, Kyle Kutzer, Daniel Weston, the list goes on. We've had so many great guests and so many people in so many different respects contributing to emerging cricket, not only the podcast, but obviously all our written content as well. So many different contributors to thank over 2020, and as well going back to when we first started, when Tim decided to throw us into a WhatsApp group chat in 2018. And hopefully 2021 will be able to deliver the emerging cricket world the coverage that it deserves. But as always, boys, it's been a pleasure. Any final points to make in our year in review or year in preview, gents? I think we've just about covered everyone's questions.
Well, if we missed 2 weeks, I think we definitely made it up tonight, didn't we?
Yes.
2 weeks at once, yeah.
Yeah. Once again, thank you to everyone around the emerging cricket community. We'll catch up with you over the course of the year, but from us, it's a warm goodbye. And to keep up with the news and events from the game's new world, make sure to log on to emergingcricket.com. And of course, we'll have the podcast rolling for you weekly very, very soon. But on behalf of Tim Cutler, Nick Skinner, and myself, Daniel Beswick, enjoy the rest of your day and week wherever you are in the emerging cricket world.